Curious how equity compensation can help build employee financial confidence and move your business forward? Tune in to the latest episode of Morgan Stanley at Work's Invested at Work podcast, where we explore the power of financial benefits and how they can help your employees in the workplace and beyond. Listen now by visiting morganstanley.com/investedAtWork or stream on Apple or Spotify. Because we believe that when employees thrive, your company thrives too. Again, visit morganstanley.com/investedAtWork to listen today.
The views expressed on this podcast are those of the participants, not of Reuters News.
UAE energy giant ADNOC is to apply highly autonomous agentic artificial intelligence in the energy industry for the first time. The push is led by the government-backed G42, which aims to diversify the UAE's economy away from oil, and which in April received a $1.5 billion investment from Microsoft.
Artificial intelligence is an endless devourer of data, power, chips, and above all, capital. The boom in large language models since the launch of OpenAI's ChatGPT in 2022 has drawn US tech titans to spend tens of billions of dollars on processors and data centers. But that's nowhere near enough to fill the $1 trillion in projected spending that Goldman Sachs foresees. Enter sovereign wealth funds, particularly those in cash-rich Gulf states. Just look at some of the things that have happened in the past few months. Abu Dhabi has set up a fund called MGX, backed by Mubadala Investment. It recently invested in OpenAI and has a new partnership with Microsoft and BlackRock. Then there's G42, an AI startup backed by the United Arab Emirates, which also has a deal with Microsoft and is a major customer of AI chip firm Cerebras. Meanwhile, governments are getting to grips with the notion that they need to develop sovereign AI. What this means for the Gulf states and what it tells us about the geopolitical tussle over artificial intelligence is the subject of this week's Viewsroom.
Welcome back to the Viewsroom, the weekly podcast that invites you, the listener, into a lively debate with our fellow columnists about the biggest stories of the week. I'm your host, Jonathan Guilford.
And I'm Peter Farr-Larson. So, Jonathan, we've been talking and writing a lot about AI over the past couple of years, but the sort of the Gulf involvement is a relatively new thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you have to kind of get to grips with the fact that everything in AI is moving so quickly. It's sort of on this, exponential curve. So I think geopolitically, everybody's always going to feel like they're a little bit behind the eight ball, but you have seen some of these links between the US kind of AI industrial base, let's call it, and the Gulf gets set up, especially Microsoft, which has been everywhere. I mean, not just in the Gulf, in Europe, they've forged ties with Mistral. Mistral
is the French AI hope, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they've kind of almost seem like the US AI industry emissary to a certain extent. And now you have BlackRock, Larry Fink is very much getting involved in all of this. So you are beginning to see that kind of cross-pollination, but obviously extremely early days. These are polities that kind of stand in between the major power blocks in China and the US.
Yeah.
So we're obviously probably going to see this evolve quite a lot in the near term. And on that front, we should bring our guests into the conversation who have been investigating exactly this subject. Joining us this week is Karen Kwok, Breakingviews AI specialist in Europe, and George Hay, our editor for Europe and the Middle East. Karen, George, welcome to the Viewsroom.
Hi there.
Hello.
Thank you both. I'm really interested in the sort of the geopolitics of all of this, but maybe if we just take a step back to start with. I mean, the artificial intelligence race seems to depend on a few key factors, right? First of all, engineers. Second of all, vast amounts of data. And finally, lots and lots of money. We know the Gulf states have lots of money, but what else are they bringing to this party?
I think for first and foremost, for the Gulf, as we all know that they produce a lot of oil and gas and produce a lot of cheap energy. So that will actually help them to pump out, to power these data center, which is essential to process data to train like large language models. So this is the first and foremost. And second of all is that not a lot of people, like not very widely reported, is that increasingly the UAE, for example, they actually managed to build their own large language model. There's this like government-funded like technology innovation institute actually produced open source LLM called Falcon, which is performing as good as like Meta's Llama's model, and it's one of the world's most advanced open source LLMs, which shows that the Abu Dhabi is actually quite serious about investing and producing the next AI revolution, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the kind of important points that Karen's making there. I mean, clearly everyone knows that the Middle East has lots of money. Everyone knows they've got lots of power, and that's partly the reason why they have so much money. But the key thing is they're not just a pile of money and a lot of oil. In the UAE in particular, they are actually, and they have been building their capabilities to be a kind of, thought leader, or they're not just a follower in this game, which is one of the more interesting bits of the story.
Well, let's get down into the specific kind of organs of that, right? I think MGX is the one that looms large, especially for folks looking at this from over in the US, just because, they've stood up the $30 billion fund with BlackRock and Microsoft to invest in data centers and renewable energy. They have, the kind of separate Microsoft partnership. Like, what is MGX exactly? Like, how does it relate to the UAE's sovereign efforts, and what is it doing in the industry?
Yeah, so basically, MGX. We were out in the Middle East recently. One of the ways that was explained to us is like it's a big fund. It's a big pot of money. It's a bit similar. One way of thinking about it is it's like the artificial intelligence version of Mubadala, which is one of the UAE's big sovereign wealth funds. This one is specifically focused on AI infrastructure, the power that goes into that, and it is investing kind of all over the place. The BlackRock fund that it's putting money into, that will be doing that kind of thing, not just in the Middle East, in the US as well. So MGX is very much the pot of money, or a big pot of money.
100 billion.
Not the same, indeed, but it's not that it's only a part of the infrastructure that UAE is building.
Yeah, and also like just to add on that is like, given the pace of AI startup, like how fast it is the startup raise money these days.
Yeah.
I think having a separate fund for them is very important, to chase that pace, basically.
Okay, but I'm still hearing basically money, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about this company G42, which I suspect I suspect some of our listeners have never heard of. I certainly hadn't heard of it until April, when they announced this sort of quite convoluted deal with Microsoft, where Microsoft is an investor, and they went on the board. Well, Karen, you've been out there with George recently, talking to people about this. What can you tell us about G42, and how should we think about that deal?
So first of all, like think of G42 is kind of like like a state-owned company that is a merger of different sorts of things that in order to power, and then having this core AI snippet that center into it. Like they have like this core 42, which is kind of like a data collection to produce AI. So they have like these research institutes called pre-sites that actually they go to libraries of Arabic libraries to scan data, to put to collect data and so on. And they also have like these different parts of it that's focused on particular sector and hoping that using AI to power those sector. For example, in health, they have this Health 42, which is like a merger of a Mubadala health division with a division of G42, and it's kind of combined effort of AI and healthcare together to join force in order to develop more AI products in the healthcare industry.
Right, but this was quite a sort of a curious deal, wasn't it? Because it wasn't just sort of Microsoft going and putting some money into an AI startup like it's done in France and the US and stuff. There was also a whole kind of like US government involvement in sort of, it feels like almost brokering this deal, right?
Yeah. So it's what's interesting in this deal is that as part of the deal, as I was talking to some people were telling me, is that Microsoft would sell a proportion of their cloud capacity to G42, and then in between that deal, that G42 used to be having relationship with Huawei, which is this Chinese telco company, and then they have to end relationship with them in order to get the support from Microsoft. So in a way, it's kind of feel like UAE is using it as a bargaining chip to pick a side, to side with US in artificial intelligence in order to let go of their relationship with China, basically.
I'm really curious about that. As it relates back to a point you were talking about previously, like G42, their efforts to go into all these libraries and kind of digitize text and whatnot. You had a piece that had like this really, really fascinating little data point in it, which was there is only roughly like 1% of text on the internet is in Arabic. And so you look at kind of the US and China and kind of how their efforts have grown up. They've grown up in very like data-rich environments, right? A really large training sets, like an internet that is geared kind of in both polities towards almost like producing data that is perfect for that training. And I kind of wondered, like, does that constrain the UAE's ambitions for its own AI efforts at all? Like, does that inform kind of how they try to pitch themselves in the middle of this geopolitical tension because there's a restraint on the homegrown industry?
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's the question I had when I was talking to them, actually. But then in their view, actually, they see it more as an opportunity because not all the Western companies can come in and just like make the same effort to build like Arabic like data and so on, and actually using the local language to build large language model is actually much cheaper for companies to produce AI models internally. So one of the companies we talked to is saying that using Arabic is like actually 1/3 cheaper than using an English model, and then they have to transfer later to Arabic when they use it internally for their businesses. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the point about there's a lot of emphasis in the Middle East, both in Saudi and the UAE, on data security. They don't necessarily want the data in their backyard being stored on clouds or physical infrastructure in the US, for example. So there is a kind of data security angle here. But like what Karen's talking about there is just. There is also an opportunity because if you become the best, if you're training your models in Arabic, then that creates a different product than if you're trading them in English. One of the ways that people were explaining it to us was just like if you type in king to a Western English trained LLM, then it will give you a particular picture of someone on a horseback. Whereas if you do it in the Middle East, training using Arabic to train the LLMs, then that will give you a picture of a sheikh. Now that's a very facile example, but there's all sorts of things that kind of all sorts of implications that spring from that, which mean that in that part of the world, they might prefer an Arabic LLM, especially as it might be cheaper as well, for the reasons that Karen's saying.
To talk to us a little bit, it feels to me like, just stepping back a bit from this a little, that there is this sort of tension here because you have this industry. You start with the chip industry; it's grown up as this very global industry. The chips are made in Taiwan. The company that makes the machine that makes the chips is in the Netherlands. The mirrors in those machines come from Germany, and so forth. It's kind of spread around. And with AI, you almost sort of have something similar where people are they're pulling data sets from one place, they're getting investors from another, they're sourcing their chips from elsewhere. But overlaid on that, you now have these sort of sovereign kind of interests, which is governments who are worried, A, about being left behind, B, worried about security, and are trying to sort of control things. And I just wonder, the Gulf is quite interesting in this respect. I just wonder, sort of, from the reporting you did there, how does that play out? Are we going to see sort of the division of the world into like different AI blocks, or are they all going to sort of rob along, but in a slightly difficult way? How do you see it working?
Well, it's very obvious that there are going to be two AI superpowers, the US and China, and it's not like people at G42, the kind of delivery mechanism or the operating bit of the UAE AI Inc., which Karen was talking about earlier. It's not like they think they necessarily are going to be able to be as important, as high end as either of those two. But the way, I suppose, the way they look at it is it's not really just about ChatGPT and those kind of the AI outputs that you can see at the moment, which have clearly come a long way. What people in that part of the world and all around the world are worried about or focused on is just the next stage of AI. Once you come to leading up to artificial superintelligence, leading up to a situation where it becomes important, the implications of these incredibly sophisticated pieces of technology is that they may be more intelligent than humans, and then that has all sorts of kind of security and moral questions. And the way they look at it there in that part of the world is, it's one consultant who we're talking to talked about it in terms of at some point in the 5-10 years time, or whenever it is, people might think of AI as like nuclear weapons, and you might have to limit who has them. And what the Gulf is saying, UAE is saying, is that they want to be seen as one of those powers, one of those AI superpowers, even if they're not as powerful as the US or China. They want to be a player, and that's why they're doing all this stuff.
And also, if you look at the history of technology development, right? When it comes to like internet age, like we see like the breakthrough of like Facebook, Microsoft, and all these like Western companies dominating the World Wide Web. And as you can see, like more than half of the World Wide Web is actually in English, and Arabic's only 1%. I think what the Saudi and UAE are trying to play here is that they, in this next revolution of technology, they want to have a place, and they want to be the one who can also profit from it rather than being the pure consumer of this technology. And I think that's what they were trying to go for.
Right. And it's interesting because you kind of posit it as they're caught between all these different concerns, like the vaunted like existential risk like you're talking about, George, or these kind of more subtle, nettlesome strategic questions about, how do you ensure like your footprint within like the global data space or what have you. And I think there's sort of like this I guess, stereotypical view that a lot of big funds out there are maybe not the most sophisticated investors compared to strategic investors or what have you. And that specifically, Gulf investors, kind of like we saw with, say, SoftBank's Vision Fund, have thrown a lot of money at things that don't always work out. Is there a danger here that Gulf investors are sort of once again getting involved in a late stage hype cycle that's just about to kind of exhaust and collapse, and then a lot of this is going to end up being fruitless?
I think there is certainly that, but I don't think it's necessarily fair to single out the Middle East as the only potential fall guys of that. Clearly, the SoftBank, the Vision Fund 1 parallel is front and center, or in the minds of the people who run UAE, because they provided 15 billion, and Saudi, they provided 45 billion, and they didn't get a very good return on that at all. But it's more just as we were saying, there's MGX, which is a large amount of money. There's G42, which is a kind of attempt to turn stuff into commercial applications. But possibly the key thing is that the UAE, they do have kind of academics who are kind of producing things like Falcon, a large language model, which are actually people in other parts of the world are going, okay, that's a valuable contribution to the debate, or that's interesting. And it's not, there's some reason to think that it's not just them throwing money at a wall and seeing what happens. They are actually kind of, they are actually bringing something to the table. And that's the difference between what's going on here and what's going on with what went on with the Vision Fund, where they just literally handed over a load of money to the Masayoshi Son, and then he didn't do much with it. So, yeah, I mean, but the risk is there. It's, you don't want to say that it isn't.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, obviously, if these investments prove disappointing, shall we say, then they'll be in good company with Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and all the others.
Yeah.
So, George and Karen, that was fascinating. We have to leave it there. We'll come back, no doubt, to hear about how the AI nuclear arms race is proceeding. That's the mental image that is going to stick with me from this discussion. But very much appreciate your time. And talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
See you.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was produced by Oliver Taslich in London. You can listen to a new episode of the Viewsroom on the Reuters app or your favorite podcast platform every Thursday. Also, don't forget to tune into our sister podcast, The Big View, every Tuesday, as well as the other great podcasts from the Reuters team. If you liked what you heard, please follow the Viewsroom and let us know what you thought. And check out our views on the biggest stories in business and finance every day at breakingviews.com and reuters.com.
Curious how equity compensation can help build employee financial confidence and move your business forward? Tune in to the latest episode of Morgan Stanley at Work's Invested at Work podcast, where we explore the power of financial benefits and how they can help your employees in the workplace and beyond. Listen now by visiting morganstanley.com/investedAtWork or stream on Apple or Spotify. Because we believe that when employees thrive, your company thrives too. Again, visit morganstanley.com/investedAtWork to listen today.